They fined me $750 for unauthorized guests after a single barbecue, so I wired a deposit on something they thought they already owned. In 12 days, their own bylaws would force them to hand me the microphone at the annual meeting. Welcome to my channel. I'm Daniel Hart, a civil engineer out of Spokane, Washington, and if you've ever tangled with a homeowners association, you already know this story, just with different names. Hit subscribe so the next time a board tries this on you, you're ready. And tell me where you're watching from. HOA country looks different coast to coast. It started the spring after my wife passed. Cancer took her fast, 3 months from diagnosis to hospice. The lake cabin we built together had been our quiet plan for retirement. After she was gone, it became my anchor. Every weekend, I drove the 88 miles north to patch decks and breathe. The HOA called it common shoreline property. I called it therapy. The first notice came on May 3rd, folded into a plastic sleeve on my gate. Violation 19B. Unauthorized structure. Deck extension. 48 social asphalt over approved limit. The structure was a single cedar step I added for my mother, who uses a cane. I sent photos, measurements, even her doctor's note about mobility. 2 weeks later, they doubled the fine. $150, now $300, and added, non-compliance may lead to lien filing within 45 days. I went to the next board meeting at the rec hall. Fluorescent lights, burnt coffee, and folding chairs. The HOA president, Carol Jensen, presided like a small-town judge. When I explained the step, she smiled tight and said, "Rules aren't about feelings, Mr. Hart. Uniformity protects value." That phrase, protects value, hit harder than I expected. My wife's name was still on that deed, her handwriting in the margins of the blueprints. That night, I walked the gravel path along the lake and passed the new dock, built without a single permit. Carol's husband and his brother-in-law had installed it over Memorial Day weekend. The HOA had budgeted $22,000 for shoreline restoration. I knew the cost of those materials, closer to $6,000. The rest was somewhere in the ether. So I started digging. Not vengeance. Data. I pulled the county parcel maps, the CCRs from 1994, and every amendment since. I built a spreadsheet, date, section, vote count, recorded file number. My mother said it looked like I was studying for a bar exam. Maybe I was, because if Carol was going to weaponize the rulebook, I'd learn every comma of it. Knowledge nugget number 1. Under Washington's revised code, FAR 64.38.020, an HOA's powers exist only as granted by recorded covenants. If a covenant isn't properly filed, it's as good as ghost ink. I found 2 that weren't. Sections 7.4 and 7.6, shoreline access fees and party permits, added in 2015 but never notarized, never recorded, meaning every party fee they'd collected, $100 per event, was void. I cross-checked meeting minutes. 63 parties, roughly $6,300. Enough to matter. That's when the wound twisted into purpose. My wife had planned a lake day every 4th of July for the neighborhood kids. Fishing, soda, fireworks at dusk. Carol canceled it the year she died, citing liability exposure. I decided the next one would happen, even if I had to host it myself. But first, I needed to know what Carol didn't. So I went to the county recorder's office, where the clerk, Linda, coffee breath, kind eyes, showed me a microfiche reader older than I am. We scrolled through reel after reel until one file caught my eye. Easement assignment. Lakefront Utility Corridor, 2002. It gave utility maintenance access across 3 lots, including Carol's, signed by the original developer. Still active. By sundown, I had a folder thick enough to make a thump when dropped. I labeled it Integrity, because that's what this was really about. 2 days later, I walked the property line with my friend Marcus, a retired surveyor who'd lived here since the early 2000s. He carried a worn field notebook and a thermos that smelled like diesel coffee. "They forget," he said, tapping the stake at the corner. "These easements don't just vanish because someone paints over a post." That night, I emailed the HOA manager, not Carol directly, always leave a paper trail, and requested the full ledger of party permit collections from 2015 onward. Under state law, they had 10 business days to comply. On day 11, I got a curt response. Your request is burdensome and irrelevant to your lot ownership. Denied. That was the spark. I printed the email, highlighted the denial, and wrote in the margin, non-compliance. RCW 64.90.495. Civil exposure. I didn't plan to sue yet. I planned to teach. At the next board meeting, I brought Marcus and Linda from the recorder's office as guests. Carol tried to bar them from entering, citing member-only sessions, but Linda calmly set her county ID on the table. Public records consultant, she said. The room went still. When I produced the microfiche copy of the unrecorded amendments, Carol's voice went brittle. Those are obsolete drafts, she snapped. I slid across the signed versions. No stamp, no recording number, no notary seal. Then you owe 63 refunds, I said, and maybe a conversation with your insurer about misappropriation. The board lawyer's pen froze mid-tap. He knew what that meant. Early the next morning, Carol parked her Lexus half on my gravel and took photos of my deck step again. Expect another citation, she said. You'll lose this, Daniel. Her tone was soft, almost pitying, like she'd seen men try before. Second engagement time. If you've ever faced down an HOA like that, tight smile, rulebook weaponized, drop how you stood your ground in the comments. And, if you're one of the few good board members watching, leave your message for them here. The rest of us could use it. That week, I noticed the pattern. A wellness check from county police after an anonymous call. Then a letter about trash can placement showing time-stamped photos from a camera I didn't own. Someone was watching. Marcus installed a motion sensor light and a cheap dash cam aimed at the street. Within days, we caught a familiar silver SUV creeping by at 11:47 p.m. License plate blurred, but the parking sticker was pure HOA issue. I filed an incident report, not as retaliation, just record-keeping. Carol Circle didn't realize that documentation, once entered into county systems, builds its own kind of gravity. Knowledge nugget number 2. In Washington, selective enforcement, punishing one homeowner while ignoring others, can nullify an HOA's action if proven consistent. Photos and timestamps turn anecdotes into evidence. While Carol tried to bury me in notices, I kept my tone polite, every reply certified mail. By June, she'd issued 7 citations totaling $1,050. I paid none, and noted that the fine schedule lacked required homeowner vote approval. I gave them rope. Marcus, ever the skeptic, asked one night, "You sure you want to poke this bear? They've got lawyers." I told him, "I don't need to fight them. I just need to own the land beneath their argument." And that's when the idea landed. The utility easement I'd found, it wasn't just for maintenance. It included a 6-foot corridor across the HOA's event lawn, right under their sprinkler manifold, and the servicing rights could be assigned. I called an attorney friend, Sophia Tron, who handled right-of-way law. She laughed when she read the document. "You realize, if you purchase this easement assignment, you technically control utility access, including service interruptions, on HOA common property." I wired $400 to the original maintenance company's successor entity that week. On paper, Hart Civil Consulting LLC now held the rights. Quietly, reversal number 1 was locked, but invisible. I said nothing. Debate time. How far should an HOA control what's technically yours? Is it still community standards if the rules aren't even legal? I want to hear where you draw that line. By July 1st, Carol announced a board appreciation party at the event lawn. $100 entry fee, HOA budget covering security and beverages. Perfect stage. The sprinklers were tied to that same utility corridor, the one now under my assignment. I set a timer for 6 o'clock p.m., just when the speeches usually start. At exactly 6 o'clock p.m. that Saturday, the sprinklers erupted in perfect sync. 24 heads jetting lake water across the manicured event lawn. A dozen people screamed and scrambled under the deck awning, while Carol stood frozen, her pastel jacket plastered to her shoulders. The air smelled like wet pine and chlorinated irony. I walked up from the dock, holding a clipboard. "Maintenance test," I said. "Authorized under the 2002 utility easement. Access executed by Hart Civil Consulting, LLC, assignee of record." She blinked at me through the spray. "You can't just..." "I can," I said, "and the county file backs me up." That was visual beat number 1, the hidden leverage revealed, clean and lawful. The next morning, the HOA inbox lit up with 47 complaints. Equipment malfunction, Carol claimed, blaming unauthorized tampering. I sent a calm email attaching the easement assignment, notarized, recorded 2 days prior. I copied the insurer. Within hours, their attorney requested a non-litigious meeting. Marcus called it the Great Soak of 24, but under the humor was strategy. I didn't disable or damage anything. I simply exercised my lawful right. Carol had built her empire on intimidation, and I'd just introduced regulation. That week, I set up a time-stamped binder, photos, certified letters, call logs. Sophia helped me draft a neutral summary for the county's community governance ombud. No accusation, just data. The numbers spoke louder than emotion. 7 citations, 3 denied record requests, 1 easement breach, $6,300 in unrefunded fees. Then came the counterattack. HOA newsletter headline: Defensive homeowner endangers common property. Below it, my name. They cited reckless misuse of irrigation infrastructure. My inbox flooded with neighbors torn between fear and applause. That night, I got a knock at 9:14 p.m. A sheriff's deputy stood there, hat in hand. "Mr. Hart, got a call about potential vandalism." I showed him the assignment papers. He skimmed, nodded, and muttered, "Yeah, that's above my pay grade." He left without a report. Neutral validation, quiet but firm. A few days later, Carol sent an email marked Urgent Board Action. She was calling an emergency vote to suspend my membership privileges. Except she couldn't. State statute required 15 days notice. Knowledge nugget number 3. HOA due process isn't optional, it's codified. Any board action without notice or hearing is voidable. Sophia advised, "Don't fight this yet. Let them hang themselves on procedure." Meanwhile, I kept busy with real work, grading plans for a highway project, and tried to ignore the hum of anxiety in my chest. My wife's photo sat by the cabin window, sunlight catching the edge of the frame. "You'd laugh at this circus," I said aloud one morning, "but you'd want it fixed." By mid-August, even non-political neighbors began to speak up. Sharon from Lot 12 started a petition to audit the HOA budget. 93 signatures in 5 days. I printed every one. The tide was shifting. That's when Carol tried her boldest move yet, a cease and desist letter claiming I was commercially exploiting HOA infrastructure. Her proof? My LLC's name on the easement. It was a bluff, but a loud one. Sophia wrote a single page. Response: pure elegance. Client's entity holds a recorded maintenance right, not a commercial operation. Any interference may constitute tortious harassment under RCW 424.5 Debate time. Should a homeowner have to create a company just to protect their rights, or should the system itself safeguard individuals? Drop your take below, or at least like the video so this one reaches more people stuck under boards like hers. The annual meeting was set for September 14th, 6 o'clock p.m. at the Lakeside Pavilion. I was on the agenda under resident comment 5 minutes. What they didn't know was that the easement's terms required a county compliance inspector's attendance for any dispute involving the corridor. I'd already filed the request. I didn't plan a trap. I planned a reckoning, on record, in front of everyone. The day of the meeting, the lake sat glass flat under an orange September sky. I wore my usual khakis and a navy work shirt, same as every board gathering. No theatrics, no swagger. Just paper in a binder and a single USB drive labeled Record. Inside the pavilion, rows of folding chairs faced a portable podium. Carol stood beside a sheet cake that read, "Stronger Together, Lakeshore HOA." The irony smelled sweeter than the frosting. Her husband hovered by the coffee urn, keeping count of who greeted whom. The county compliance inspector arrived at 5:57 p.m. Uniform polo, badge clipped to his belt. I watched Carol's face tighten when he introduced himself. "Routine oversight," he said. "Easement dispute hearing, just observing." When my turn came, I didn't raise my voice. I set my binder down, clicked open the rings, and slid out the first certified letter. 7 citations, I began. None supported by recorded authority. 2 unfiled amendments, 1 misuse of collected fees, and a lapse in procedural notice. I lifted each page as I spoke. The inspector's pen moved steadily. Carol cut in. Mr. Hart is manipulating technicalities to avoid community standards. Technicalities are what laws are made of, I said. Without them, you have opinions. The crowd shifted. Folding chairs creaked. Murmurs fluttered. Someone clapped once, quickly. I played a short clip from my dashcam, the silver SUV doing its nightly crawl. I paused at the parking sticker. That vehicle belongs to the HOA's maintenance contractor. Contract signed by the president's spouse. No competitive bids. Gasps. Carol's lawyer whispered something urgent, but she kept her eyes locked on me. Debate time. What's worse? Corruption born of arrogance or silence from those who know better? Tell me what you'd confront first if this were your neighborhood. The inspector cleared his throat. Per county code, these financials will need independent verification. He handed Carol a form, yellow carbon copy visible. Failure to comply within 30 days could suspend the association's permit for managed common areas. That single sheet landed heavier than a gavel. Visual beat number 2. I didn't gloat. I simply gathered my papers and said, "You still have time to make this right." Outside, Marcus lit a cigarette he didn't even smoke. "You just dropped a meteor," he said, exhaling nothing. Over the next week, dominoes began to tilt. 2 board members resigned, citing personal reasons. The insurer requested an emergency audit before renewing coverage. The HOA's bank froze discretionary spending pending documentation review. Meanwhile, I returned to my engineering job, kept receipts, and stayed silent online. Sophia warned, "Let the paperwork speak. Don't feed their narrative." But Carol couldn't resist control. She started a whisper campaign, emails hinting I'd hacked irrigation controls. I countered with quiet precision, forwarded the inspection report confirming no tampering. Each lie met with fact, each rumor with timestamp. Knowledge nugget number 4. In civil disputes, the first party to lose credibility loses leverage, no matter how long the fought is. By early October, the HOA called a reconciliation meeting. The agenda arrived typed but unsigned, a rookie mistake. I added my conditions by hand. Public minutes, open voting. County observer present. They didn't object. That night before the meeting, I sat on the deck, the lake reflecting pinprick stars. My wife's photo leaned against a candle. "Tomorrow," I told her, "we stop surviving and start rebuilding." The reconciliation meeting felt like walking into a storm that didn't know whether to rain or break apart. Chairs were half filled. A few neighbors brought notebooks this time instead of wine glasses. Carol wore gray instead of her usual bright suits, a color that looked like surrender trying to pass for neutrality. She started with practiced calm. "We've all made mistakes," she said, "and we just want to move forward as a community." I kept my expression still. The inspector was again in the back row, same badge clipped to his belt, pen ready. When she offered partial restitution for the unfiled party fees, 30%, I opened my binder and read aloud from the CCRs. Any funds collected without recordation must be returned in full within 90 days of discovery. Silence. Paper shuffled. Marcus coughed into his hand, half grin hidden. Then Carol tried one last gambit. "If you insist on full refunds, we'll need to raise dues by 25% next year." That line was her undoing. Sophia leaned forward from the visitor seats. "That constitutes coercion under state nonprofit code," she said evenly. "You can't threaten assessments to offset illegal collections." The inspector nodded, noting the time. That night became a turning point. The board called an emergency recess. Carol never came back to the table. Her husband gathered the cake untouched. By midnight, an email circulated. Acting President, Mark Feldman, interim until special election. But the backlash came quick. A Facebook group, Save Our HOA, accused me of destroying unity. The post spread screenshots of my LLC paperwork, twisting it into conspiracy. Retaliation always looks like noise until it hits your front porch. The next morning I found a warning sticker slapped on my mailbox. Improper design, non-compliant height, a petty jab, but it landed. I sat in my truck longer than I'd like to admit, wondering if this was worth it. Then I looked toward the dock, the same dock Carol had built illegally, and remembered my wife sketching picnic layouts on that very shoreline. The cause wasn't just revenge, it was restoration. Over the next week, I documented every new citation, every anonymous post, each drive-by photo. By Friday, the folder weighed nearly 4 pounds. At my lowest, my mother called. "Danny," she said, "your father fought City Hall over a property tax in '82. You know what he told me after he won?" "What?" "That a home isn't walls, it's the ground that remembers who defended it." That line carried me. Debate time. When rules become weapons, what's the right way to respond? Fight, reform, or walk away? Tell me which path you'd take if this were your neighborhood. By mid-October, the audit report landed. 32 unapproved expenditures, $9,870 unaccounted for. The insurer suspended coverage pending remediation. Without insurance, the HOA couldn't operate legally. That was my quiet leverage, even beyond the easement. Marcus came over with his thermos and a grin. "You realize they'll have to negotiate or dissolve. Either way, you get peace." "Peace," I said, "but not silence. I want safeguards so no one goes through this again." He nodded. "Then write your terms now." So I did, drafted a reform proposal. Term limits, open budgets, quarterly audits, transparent voting, and a community access charter for the lakefront. My ask was, and money. It was structure. Next morning, I printed 3 copies, each sealed with a blue tab. One went to the inspector, one to the acting president, and one to my binder marked Resolution Draft. I had no idea that Carol wasn't done yet. At 8:23 p.m. that night, my security light flared. The dash cam caught her silhouette. Dark coat, flashlight beam sweeping my porch. She bent down, slid something under the door, and hurried away. It was an envelope. Inside, a handwritten note. "You think you've won, but you don't know who funded this place." I held that note under a desk lamp, tracing every letter. The handwriting leaned right, deliberate, confident. The phrase, "who funded this place," hung in my head like a riddle. Carol had hinted before that the development company still advised the board, but this sounded different, like there was a deeper pocket directing her. I scanned the HOA's public filings again. The original developer, Lakeshore Properties LLC, had dissolved in 2012. But buried in a 2021 amendment, I spotted a new infrastructure grant entry, $50,000 labeled Maintenance Subsidy, Third-Party Escrow. No disclosure of source. That violated state nonprofit reporting. Marcus and I cross-referenced property tax IDs. The payer on the escrow was a shell, Horizon Civic Investments. I followed the paper trail. Delaware LLC, registered agent matching a downtown real estate firm. Sophia did the deep dive. "Daniel," she said, half whispering over the phone, "that's a holding subsidiary for the same developer family. They never left. They're still extracting fees through your HOA." That was it, the secret leverage behind everything. Carol wasn't rogue. She was a proxy. "Can we prove it?" I asked. "With the escrow statement, yes," Sophia said. "And if we show they're controlling an HOA post-dissolution, that's regulatory fraud. You can exchange that truth for reform." So I played patient again. I drafted a letter to the interim board proposing a full community reform package. My earlier terms, stating politely that I possessed records of continued developer financial interest that may affect IRS Form 990 compliance. No threat, just sunlight on paper. While we waited for response, the harassment peaked. A sudden paint color violation, a claim that my fence exceeded height limits by 2 inches, even a bogus noise complaint citing construction sounds at 3 o'clock a.m. I wasn't home those nights. I built a log, each notice, timestamp, and my location evidence. One evening, a car idled outside too long. My mother was inside, visiting. Her silhouette crossed the blinds. I felt my chest tighten. For the first time, I considered moving. But then I looked at that dock again, unfinished cedar, still holding her memory. "They won't push us out," I told her softly. "Not again." Debate time. When power hides behind paperwork, what should justice look like? Lawsuits, exposure, or negotiation? Drop your view below. 2 days later, the inspector called. "Mr. Hart, the county received your reform proposal and related documents. The Attorney General's office wants to observe the next HOA session." That was confirmation enough. Reversal number 1 had matured into ammunition. Now came the set piece. The special meeting was scheduled for November 2nd at 6:30 p.m. The agenda: Financial Disclosure Review and Governance Proposal. I showed up early. The room was packed, more residents than I'd ever seen, people tired of whispered rules. Carol, somehow still seated at the head, looked pale but composed. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to clarify that our funding sources are entirely legitimate." I connected my laptop to the projector, opened the escrow records. The HOA's logo flickered on the screen, followed by the payment line: $50,000, Horizon Civic Investments. "Who signed of?" "Of?" I asked. The treasurer stammered. Carol's eyes darted to the floor. Sophia stood, credentials visible. "For the record, this funding relationship violates state HOA independent statutes. If unaddressed, the association risks dissolution." Then the inspector spoke, steady and clear. "County compliance verifies the authenticity of these records. We'll record this meeting for the state's audit division." Visual beat number 2 replayed in real time. Microphone slick with condensation, the inspector's voice carrying through static speakers, while Carol's authority drained with every sentence. I didn't smile. I simply said, "It's not about punishment, it's about rebuilding trust." Neighbors nodded. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was unanimous. The room held that hum you only hear when a crowd realizes the power dynamic has flipped. Carol reached for her water, hands trembling just enough that the glass clicked against the table. The inspector's recorder light blinked red, steady as a heartbeat. She tried to rally. "You don't understand," she said. "The developers fund was meant to stabilize dues. Everyone benefits." Sophia's reply was surgical. "Intent doesn't nullify disclosure requirements. Once the developer's influence extends past dissolution, you've crossed into controlled entity territory. That makes every assessment collected under that structure legally questionable." Mark Feldman, the interim president, rubbed his temples. "So what happens now?" I stood, not as an enemy but as a neighbor. "Now we fix it before outsiders do. We vote for transparency, return misused funds, and elect an independent board under state oversight. That's how you save the community." The inspector turned his clipboard. "That proposal aligns with compliance best practices. I can certify it for interim status." It wasn't about me anymore. It was about momentum. Sharon from Lot 12 raised her hand. "Can we add a clause that no board member serves more than 2 consecutive terms?" Heads nodded around her. Someone else shouted, "And quarterly public audits." The energy snowballed, an uprising in polite diction. Debate time. Should local governments mandate oversight for HOAs, or should residents self-police? Drop your thoughts. This argument hits every county sooner or later. Carol slumped back, her voice smaller. "I only wanted order." "You can have order," I said quietly, "just not ownership." By the meeting's end, 6 motions passed unanimously. The inspector signed the provisional reform charter on the spot, his pen squeaking against the damp paper. Visual beat number 3 formed itself. That signature beside a curling violation notice from months ago, both sealed under a paperclip. Outside, rain began to fall. Thin, cold, honest. Marcus clapped my shoulder. "That's one for the history books, brother." The aftermath moved faster than gossip. Local papers ran headlines. "Developer influence found in HOA finances." Carol resigned 2 days later, citing medical leave. The county audit team took over for 90 days. But what hit hardest wasn't vindication. It was a note slid under my door, this time typed, "You were right. I let them use me. I'm sorry." No signature, but I knew the handwriting even through the printer ink. I folded it once and put it in my binder. Over the next weeks, I worked with the new board to draft proper bylaws. Sophia volunteered pro bono to review them. Marcus built a simple spreadsheet template anyone could use to track budgets. Sharon organized a lake cleanup. The same people who'd whispered now waved from their porches. Still, part of me stayed watchful. Power never disappears, it just waits for someone inattentive. Debate time. When a corrupt system collapses, is forgiveness a form of strength or a loophole? I'd like to hear what you think. The inspector visited one last time in HOA. Early December, clipboard lighter now. "We'll close the file next week," he said. "You set a good precedent." I asked him, "Do you think they'll learn from it?" He smiled. They always do, for about a generation. 3 weeks later, the transformation was visible even in the small things. The notice board that once carried fines and warnings now displayed volunteer schedules and recycling tips. The lakefront gate no longer locked at sunset. Families walked the path with lanterns, kids skipping stones where the private property sign used to glare. The county closed its file on December 19th with a simple line: "Compliance achieved. Community governance model adopted." I printed it and pinned it beside my wife's photo. The glow of the printer warmed my hands for a moment before fading, the quiet kind of victory she would have appreciated. The new board voted to rename the common area Heart Point. I tried to decline, but the motion carried unanimously. I compromised, added a plaque beneath: "For everyone who believed rules should serve people, not the other way around." A local station ran a short feature, 2 minutes between weather and sports. Homeowner reforms HOA through lawful persistence. They showed the shot of me closing the binder, the same one labeled Integrity. That night, sitting on the porch, Marcus joined me with that battered thermos. "So what's next for you?" he asked. I smiled. "Maybe I finally finish rebuilding that dock." He chuckled. "And if another board comes after you?" I tapped the side of the binder. "Then they'll find the blueprint already written. If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend who's still stuck in a battle like this. Subscribe so future stories reach you first, and as responsible neighbors, share this so others learn, because that part's on us. A week later, I walked the shoreline as fog drifted off the water. The new treasurer, Sharon, waved from the pavilion where volunteers were setting up for the first annual Community Day. Kids' laughter echoed against the cabins. Someone grilled burgers. The dock lights reflected in the water like a promise kept. The inspector sent a brief email. "Case closed, precedent noted." Sophia framed it like a certificate. Final reflection. Justice doesn't roar. It records, notarizes, and waits for signatures. Every small act of order builds a louder kind of peace. As for me, I've started documenting another community 2 counties over, different faces, same story beginning. The file on my desk reads, Cedar View HOA, initial review. And just like that, the next fight found its way home.